A German kingdom that crowned British kings, the Electorate of Hanover was one of Europe's most unique realms. For over a century, its rulers sat on the English throne, shaping the fate of two nations. But how did this alliance begin? And why did Hanover vanish from history? This is the story of a lost kingdom of Europe, where German princes became British monarchs. The shadow crown of Hanover. In the tangled heart of the Holy Roman Empire, from the mists of the old Principality of Kallenberg, rose the Electorate of Hanover, a land whose fate would be forever entwined with that of the British crown. Born of dynastic division within the ancient House of Welf, Hanover's true rise began in 1692 when its prince was anointed an elector, thrusting the quiet German state into the storm of European power. But destiny had larger plans. With the Act of Settlement and the death of Queen Anne looming, the Protestant Electress Sophia of Hanover was named heir to the British throne. When her son George ascended the throne of Great Britain in 1714, Hanover found itself yoked to a distant island it would never truly call its own. Britain, hesitant and often begrudging, defended its German shadow state through war and revolution, while Hanover stubbornly kept its own laws, rulers, and soul. Lost to Napoleon, reborn a kingdom in 1814, and finally severed from Britain's crown in 1837, Hanover's story is one of whispered alliances, reluctant unions, and a quiet power that shaped two empires without ever standing at the center of either. Hanover ascends. In the waning light of a war-torn empire, one man's loyalty carved a path to greatness. In 1692, as cannon smoke still lingered from the War of the Grand Alliance, Emperor Leopold I rewarded Duke Ernest Augustus of Brunswick-Lüneburg, father to George I of Britain, with the coveted title of Elector. It was a bold move, fiercely contested, and only solidified in 1708 by his son George Louis, a man destined to wear two crowns. Though technically Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg, it was Hanover, his seat of power, that came to define his name and legacy. The newly forged electorate could grow, but it could never be divided, etched into law as an indivisible jewel of the Holy Roman Empire. Its lands spanned ancient principalities, Kallenberg, Grubenhagen, Lüneburg, and counties long entwined with dynastic ambition. When Hanover seized Bremen-Verden in 1719, it wasn't just expanding. It was claiming its place among Europe's power players. Bound by blood, law, and iron resolve, Hanover was no longer a quiet duchy in the north. It was an electorate with imperial weight, casting long shadows across the continent and, soon, across the sea. Two thrones, one crown. When George Louis ascended the British throne in 1714, the thrones of Great Britain and the Electorate of Hanover were bound not by conquest, but by blood, and a careful balance of politics and legacy. The new King of Britain was still, at heart, an elector of the Holy Roman Empire, and with every passing year, Hanover's influence grew deeper into the heart of northern Germany. By 1719, George had secured the prized duchies of Bremen and Verden from a crumbling Swedish empire, and in 1728, his son George II was granted the ancient fief of Saxe-Lauenburg, solidifying their grip on lands steeped in medieval power. Yet even as the Hanoverians ruled over age-old German estates, their feet were firmly planted in London. The court in Hanover delegated authority through the Department of Bremen-Verden, Hadeln, Lauenburg and Bentheim, but real decisions came from across the Channel. Through the flickering candlelight of St. James's Palace, the German Chancery maintained the lifeline, translating the whispers of German lords into the commands of kings who now wore English crowns. It was a union both personal and political. One sovereign, two realms, and a fragile dance between homeland and empire. The war that tested two worlds. As cannon fire echoed from the American wilderness to the rolling fields of Europe, the 7 Years' War became a crucible for empires, and for the Electorate of Hanover. George II, King of Britain and Elector of Hanover, faced a terrifying prospect, that French armies might overrun his ancestral homeland. In 1757, that fear became reality. French forces stormed into Hanover, defeating his own son, Prince William, Duke of Cumberland, at the Battle of Hasenbeck. With the Anglo-Hanoverian army retreating in shame to the convent of Zeven, Cumberland capitulated, sealing the humiliating Convention of Kloster-Zeven. But George II, defiant and unbending, refused to acknowledge the defeat. From across the Channel, he summoned allies: Prussia, Hesse-Kassel, and Brunswick, and turned the tide. Within a year, Hanover was free again, her soil no longer trampled by foreign boots. Though scarred, the electorate stood tall, a symbol of the lengths a king would go to protect both crown and country, on two continents, in one war. A kingdom pulled by empires and ideals. As revolutionary fires consumed France and monarchs across Europe trembled, the Electorate of Hanover once again found itself entangled in the violent tides of continental conflict. Bound by blood and crown to Britain, Hanover sent thousands of its sons to the Low Countries to battle the new French Republic, not for Hanover's own soil, but in defense of a crumbling old order. Yet while its soldiers bled far from home, Hanover itself remained untouched, held in uneasy neutrality by the broader decrees of empire. The Treaty of Basel saw Prussia withdraw and draw a fragile line, along the River Main, that promised peace for northern German lands. But it was a peace built on shifting sands. Hanover, though not at war, was hardly free. It had to feed and fund the demarcation army, a cold symbol of its place, caught between the ambitions of empires and the chaos of revolution. Hanover in the storm of empires. In the shadow of Napoleon's rise, the Electorate of Hanover became a chessboard for great powers, its fate tossed between ambition, betrayal, and survival. First betrayed by Prussia, then trampled by French forces, Hanover fell without a shot in 1801, only to be handed from one occupier to the next like a pawn in Europe's deadly game. The Holy Roman Empire, once Hanover's imperial anchor, collapsed in 1806, severing centuries-old ties and stripping the land of its identity as an electorate. Yet even as Hanover's soil was carved up, into Westphalia, into French imperial districts, its soul lived on across the Channel. In London, ministers plotted, diplomats pleaded, and a new legion of exiled Hanoverians, King George's German Legion, took up arms, the only German force to never yield to Napoleon. The fire of resistance burned quietly until 1813, when Allied victory at Leipzig cracked Napoleon's grip and swept his puppet kingdoms into the dust. Hanover, battered but unbowed, emerged from the ashes not as a fractured electorate, but reborn, proud and sovereign, as the Kingdom of Hanover. The elector's crown, Hanover's unbroken chain. In a world where noble bloodlines often splintered realms into chaos, the Electorate of Hanover stood defiant, indivisible, unyielding, and born of calculated reform. When Emperor Leopold I elevated Ernest Augustus's domain to electoral dignity in 1692, it wasn't just a title, it was a defiant reshaping of dynastic fate. Male primogeniture replaced the old fractured inheritance customs, slicing through centuries of Salic tradition with imperial blessing. From Kallenberg and Grubenhagen to the prized inheritance of Celle, the electors of Hanover gathered power, holding tight to the rule that their land would not be divided again. Even after the Holy Roman Empire crumbled in 1806, George III clung to the echoes of its grandeur, styling himself elector of a realm that no longer existed, refusing, through title and spirit, to let the legacy of Hanover's electors fade into history's shadow. The Electorate of Hanover may be gone, but its legacy lives on in Britain and Germany. Which other forgotten European kingdoms should we explore next? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories from History Love. Until next time, keep uncovering the past.